A grand multi-tiered birthday cake sat untouched in the center of a lavishly decorated ballroom. Maya, dressed in a shimmering $5,000 designer gown, stood alone under a spotlight, her eyes red from crying. She looked down at a small, battered wooden box on the table, the only gift that had been left behind. In a fit of rage, she swept her arm across the table, sending the expensive crystal glasses and the tiered cake crashing to the floor. Is this it? I invited everyone. I gave them everything. And the only person who showed up was the one person I kicked out. Maya screamed. She collapsed into the pile of ruined cake, clutching her head. Beside her, a discarded invitation lay face down in the frosting. It was addressed to her mother, with the words "Do not admit" scrawled across it in Maya's own handwriting. Welcome to Moments and Meanings, by Anne. I'm so glad you're here. Today's story, about a woman who threw away her mother's cheap gift only to realize she threw away a fortune, is a heartbreaking look at what happens when we value the guest list more than the people who actually love us. Maya thought she was throwing the party of the century for her high society friends, but she ended up learning that when you trade your soul for status, you eventually find yourself sitting at a table for one. Watch until the very end, because the secret hidden inside that cheap wooden box is about to change Maya's life forever. Don't forget to subscribe. Now, let's see how this all began. The morning of Maya's 30th birthday began not with a hug, but with a checklist. She stood in the center of her sprawling, marble-floored penthouse, her eyes darting between her phone and the team of decorators scurrying around her. To Maya, this wasn't just a birthday. It was a branding event. She was dressed in a sleek white silk robe, sipping a green juice while her two closest friends, Sloane and Chloe, lounged on the velvet sofa, scrolling through Instagram. I'm telling you, Maya, Sloane said, not looking up from her screen, if the governor doesn't show up, the photos won't trend. You need the elite. No fillers. Maya nodded sharply. I know. I've pruned the list 3 times. Only the top 1% are coming. The doorbell rang, a soft melodic chime that was quickly interrupted by the heavy rhythmic thud of a walker. A small, frail woman entered the room. It was Elias, Maya's mother. She was wearing a simple, faded floral dress and sensible shoes that looked drastically out of place against the polished floors. In her weathered hands, she clutched a small, battered wooden box tied with a piece of ordinary twine. Happy birthday, Maya, Elias said, her voice trembling with a mixture of pride and nerves. I walked all the way from the bus stop. I wanted to give this to you before the crowds arrived. Sloane and Chloe exchanged a disgusted look. Chloe let out a sharp, mocking puff of air. Is that cedar? It smells like a thrift store in here now. Maya felt a hot flash of embarrassment. She looked at her mother, the wrinkled skin, the cheap dress, the embarrassing gift, and then looked at her high society friends. Mom, what are you doing here so early? Maya asked, her voice cold and hushed. The caterers are setting up. This isn't a good time. I just wanted to see you, Elias whispered, reaching out to touch Maya's arm. And I wanted you to have this box. It's been in our family for... Mom, please, Maya interrupted, pulling her arm away. I'm busy. Just put it on the counter with the other deliveries. And, are you planning on wearing that to the party? Elias looked down at her favorite dress, the one she had saved specifically for today. I thought I looked nice. Sloane let out a loud laugh. Nice for a grocery run, maybe. Maya, the Vogue photographer is coming at 8. You can't have background noise ruining the aesthetic. Maya looked at the small wooden box, then at her mother's hopeful eyes. Instead of gratitude, she felt only a desperate need to protect her image. She grabbed the box and shoved it into a kitchen drawer, out of sight. Maybe it's better if you head back home, Mom, Maya said, not meeting her mother's eyes. The party is going to be very loud. Very crowded. It's not really your scene. I'll call you next week, okay? Elias stood frozen. The light in her eyes didn't just dim, it went out. She looked at the drawer where her heart's offering had been discarded like trash. Without a word, she turned her walker around and began the slow, painful journey back toward the door. As she left, Maya turned back to her friends, forcing a smile as she picked up her checklist, ignoring the hollow ache starting to grow in her chest. The sun began to set, casting long golden shadows across the penthouse. but the atmosphere inside was far from peaceful. It was a whirlwind of frantic luxury. Maya stood in front of a floor-to-ceiling mirror, being stitched into a gown that cost more than her mother's modest home. The fabric was a metallic mesh that caught every light, designed to make her look like a goddess, untouchable and cold. Sloane and Chloe were already dressed, sipping champagne and critiquing the floral arrangements. The ballroom was a sea of white orchids and crystal, a silent testament to Maya's social standing. But even as the room filled with the scent of expensive perfume and the soft hum of a professional string quartet, Maya's mind kept drifting back to the kitchen drawer. "Did you check the guest list one last time?" Sloane asked, checking her makeup in her compact. "I heard the Sterling twins are coming, but only if the vibe is right. We can't have any hiccups." Maya paused, her heart stuttering. I told my mom it was better if she stayed home. She's not coming." Chloe clinked her glass against Sloane's. "Good call. Honestly, Maya, it's for her own good. She would have felt so out of place. Imagine her trying to talk to the Sterlings about bus routes and knitting while they're discussing their new yacht in St. Tropez. It would have been a disaster for everyone." Maya tried to laugh, but it felt like swallowing dry sand. "Yeah. A disaster." Just then her phone buzzed. It was a text from her mother. "I left a little note inside the box, Maya. Please read it before the party starts. I love you so much. Happy 30th. Maya looked at the screen, her thumb hovering over the reply button. She felt a surge of guilt, a memory of her mother working double shifts at the hospital just to buy Maya her first designer bag for prom. But as she looked up, she saw Sloane watching her. "Is that her again?" Sloane asked, her voice laced with pity. "Maya, you're 30 now. You have to set boundaries. If you keep letting her drag you back to that small-town mindset, you'll never be the woman you're meant to be. You're a mogul now. Moguls don't have room for sentimental clutter." Maya looked at her reflection, the sharp contour of her makeup, the diamonds at her throat. She looked powerful. She looked like she belonged in the magazines. With a sharp intake of breath, she deleted the text. "You're right," Maya said, her voice hardening. "I don't have time for clutter." She walked into the kitchen, the heels of her shoes clicking like a metronome on the marble. She opened the drawer and pulled out the wooden box. It felt heavy in her hand, the wood smooth and worn. For a second she considered opening it. But the sound of loud laughter from the ballroom, the elite guests beginning to arrive, snapped her back to her reality. She walked over to the trash chute in the hallway. "Wait, Maya." Chloe called out, following her with a mischievous glint in her eye. "What are you doing? Let's see what's in it first. Maybe there's some vintage jewelry we can laugh at." "It's nothing," Maya said, her voice shaking. "Just some old junk. My mom is obsessed with the past." "Give it here," Sloane said, joining them. She grabbed the box from Maya's hand, shaking it. A dull thud came from inside. "It sounds like a rock." "Literally. Your mother gave you a rock for your 30th birthday?" The two friends erupted into giggles. Maya felt the heat of humiliation crawling up her neck. She looked at the box her mother had carried through the rain, the box she had walked miles to deliver because she couldn't afford a taxi. In that moment, Maya had a choice. She could defend the woman who gave her life, or she could join the women who gave her status. "Throw it away, Maya," Sloane pressured, holding the box out over the open trash chute. "Prove that you're done with the old Maya. Start your new decade with a clean slate." Maya reached out. Her fingers brushed the wood. She thought of her mother's floral dress. She thought of the way her mother's hands shook when she held the walker. "I'm done with the past," Maya whispered. She took the box and dropped it. The sound of it hitting the bottom of the metal chute echoed up like a gunshot. It was a hollow, final sound. "There," Maya said, turning her back on the hallway. "Now let's go. My guests are waiting." The betrayal was complete. She had chosen the glitter over the gold, the audience over the mother. As she stepped into the ballroom, the lights blinded her, and for a moment she couldn't see anyone at all. She put on her best hostess smile, greeting CEOs and influencers, laughing at jokes that weren't funny, and drinking champagne that tasted like vinegar. Sloane and Chloe hovered by her side like shadows, ensuring every photo was perfect, every tag was correct. Maya was the center of the world. She was the queen of the night. But as the hours ticked by, a strange thing began to happen. The elite guests she had cultivated so carefully began to drift away. The governor's assistant called to say he wouldn't be coming. The Sterling twins stayed for 10 minutes, took one photo, and whispered to each other that the party felt stale before slipping out the back door. Maya didn't notice at first. She was too busy chasing the next important person. "Where's everyone going?" Maya asked Chloe around 11 o'clock. The room, which had been packed with 300 people, was now down to 50. "Oh, there's an after-party at the Newberry estate," Chloe said, checking her own reflection. "Sloane and I were actually going to head over there soon. You don't mind, do you? I mean, your party is, kind of, wrapping up." Maya looked around. The expensive orchids were wilting under the heat of the stage lights. Half-eaten plates of caviar were scattered on the tables. The string quartet had packed up their instruments. "But it's my birthday," Maya said, her voice sounding small for the first time that night. "I spent 6 months planning this. I spent $50,000 on the decor alone." Sloane patted Maya's cheek, a gesture that felt more like an insult than a comfort. "And it was lovely, darling. Truly. But you know how it is. People go where the energy is. We'll talk tomorrow, okay?" Maya watched as her best friends, the women who had encouraged her to throw away her mother's gift, walked out the door without looking back. They didn't even say goodbye to the birthday girl. They just followed the next bright light. By midnight, the silence in the ballroom was deafening. The staff began to break down the tables, the sound of clinking silverware echoing in the vast, empty space. Maya stood in the center of the room, her $5,000 gown suddenly feeling like a suit of armor that was too heavy to wear. She was 30 years old. She was wealthy. She was successful. And she was absolutely, utterly alone. She walked toward the kitchen, her feet aching in her designer heels. She opened the drawer where she had originally hidden the box, half hoping she had imagined throwing it away. But the drawer was empty. She leaned against the counter, the silence of the penthouse pressing in on her. She looked at the trash chute in the hallway. The point of no return had passed hours ago. She had sacrificed her mother's heart for a room full of people who didn't even care enough to stay for cake. Maya sank to the floor, the silk of her dress bunching around her. The party was over, and for the first time in her life, she realized that she had invited everyone in the world except for the only person who actually loved her. 6 months had passed, but the silence in the penthouse had never truly left. Maya sat at her polished marble desk, staring at a stack of legal documents that seemed to mock her. The status she had traded everything for was crumbling. Without the genuine connections she had once ignored, her business partnerships had soured. Investors had pulled out, realizing that behind the glossy Instagram photos and high society parties, there was no substance. The bank was calling, and the looming threat of bankruptcy was a shadow she couldn't outrun. Sloane and Chloe were long gone, having deleted her number the moment her credit cards started being declined. She was a social pariah, a fallen star in a world that only worshipped the rising ones. Desperate for a loan or a miracle, Maya found herself standing outside a prestigious downtown gallery. She had heard that a mysterious new philanthropist, known only as the Guardian, was hosting a private event. If she could just get 5 minutes of their time, she might save her company. She smoothed out her last remaining designer suit, one that was starting to show wear, and walked inside. The gallery was filled with light, but it wasn't the cold artificial light of her birthday party. It was warm and filled with people who seemed to truly care about the art on the walls. As Maya navigated the room, she felt a strange sense of déjà vu. The art wasn't abstract or trendy, it was soulful. It featured paintings of old neighborhoods, worn hands, and simple floral dresses. "Maya?" The voice was soft, but it carried an authority that made Maya's heart stop. She turned around and gasped. Standing there was Jada, her mother's neighbor from the old apartment complex, the woman who used to help her mother with the groceries when Maya was too busy to visit. But Jada wasn't in her nurse's scrubs. She was dressed in an elegant, emerald green suit, looking like the powerful director of a massive foundation. "Jada? What are you doing here?" Maya asked, her voice trembling. "I'm the executive director of this gallery," Jada said, her eyes filled with a mixture of pity and steel. "But I think the person you're really looking for is in the garden." Maya followed Jada's gaze toward the glass doors leading to a courtyard. There, sitting on a stone bench, was a woman surrounded by city officials and famous artists. She was dressed in a simple but exquisitely tailored linen suit. She wasn't using a walker anymore. She leaned gracefully on a polished silver cane. It was Elias. But she didn't look like the frail woman who had been kicked out of the penthouse. She looked radiant. She looked like a queen. "Mom?" Maya whispered, stepping into the garden. The conversation around the bench stopped. Elias turned her head, her gaze meeting Maya's. There was no anger in her eyes, only a profound, quiet sadness. "Hello, Maya," Elias said. "I don't understand," Maya stammered, looking at the wealthy people hanging on her mother's every word. "How is this possible?" Jada said, "You're the donor? You're the guardian?" "I was never just your mother, Maya," Elias said softly, standing up with a strength Maya hadn't seen in years. "I was a woman who spent 40 years saving, investing, and building a legacy so that my daughter would never have to want for anything. I lived simply so that you could live grandly. But you were so ashamed of the simple things that you never bothered to look at what was right in front of you." Maya felt the ground shift beneath her. The woman she had treated like background noise was the very person she was now begging to save her. The roles had completely reversed. Maya was the one in the faded suit, standing with her metaphorical hand out, while the mother she had discarded held the keys to the kingdom. "I came to ask for help," Maya choked out, tears blurring her vision. "The business, the penthouse, I'm losing it all." Elias looked at her daughter, really looked at her, for the first time in months. "You didn't lose your business because of money, Maya. You lost it because you threw away your foundation. You wanted a birthday party for the elite, and you got exactly what you asked for. A party for none." Maya stood paralyzed as the elite crowd parted, leaving her exposed in the center of the garden. The whispers of the artists and socialites felt like needles against her skin. Her mother, Elias, reached into the small silk clutch at her side and pulled out something that made Maya's heart stop. It was the small, battered wooden box. How do you have that?" Maya gasped, her voice barely a whisper. "I saw it go down the chute. I heard it hit the bottom. I knew the woman I raised was still in there somewhere, even if she was hiding behind layers of silken pride," Elias said, her voice steady. "When I left your building that night, I didn't go home. I went to the basement. I waited by the compactors. I spent 3 hours sifted through the trash of the elite until I found what you had thrown away." Elias stepped forward and placed the box in Maya's trembling hands. "Go ahead, open it. You were so worried about the optics of the box that you never cared about the value of the contents." With shaking fingers, Maya pried open the lid. She expected to see a rock, as Sloane had joked, or perhaps a piece of vintage costume jewelry. Instead, her eyes widened as she pulled out a thick, yellowed envelope and a heavy, tarnished brass key. She opened the envelope. Inside were not just photos but deeds, land titles to the very block her mother's apartment sat on, and shares in a legacy shipping company that had been quietly compounding for decades. But at the very bottom was a handwritten note on a piece of simple lined paper. "My dearest Maya, your father didn't leave us with nothing. He left us with a choice. He told me to keep this secret until you were 30, to see if you would value the hand that fed you or the hand that flattered you. This key opens the safe deposit box at the corner bank. It holds the original patents for the technology your mogul friends are currently trying to buy. I wanted to give you an empire for your birthday, but I realized an empire is worthless if the queen has no heart. I hope you choose the note over the money." Maya looked up, the weight of the realization crashing down on her like a tidal wave. The cheap wooden box hadn't been a burden, it was a lifeboat. Her mother wasn't a filler for the guest list, she was the architect of everything Maya had ever dreamed of. "Mom, I am so sorry," Maya sobbed, dropping to her knees on the manicured grass of the gallery. "I was so blind. I thought I was building something, but I was just destroying the only thing that mattered. Please, take the money back. I don't want the patents. I just want to come home." She reached out to grab her mother's hand, but Elias gently stepped back. The silence that followed was more painful than any insult Sloane had ever hurled. "The money is yours, Maya," Elias said, her voice filled with a weary kind of grace. "The deeds, the patents, the legacy, it's all legally yours now. You can save your company. You can keep your penthouse. You can buy 1,000 more dresses and hire 10,000 more friends. But I don't want them. Maya cried. I want us. I want to go back to how it was. Elias looked at the gallery walls, at the paintings of a life lived with honesty and love. You can't go back, Maya. You can only go forward. You threw me away to impress people who didn't even stay for your cake. You got exactly what you wanted. The status, the wealth, and the crown. Elias turned to Jada, who placed a supportive hand on her shoulder. But the one thing you can't buy, Maya, is a seat at a table where you are actually loved. I've spent my life protecting you. Now, I'm going to spend the rest of it protecting my peace. As Elias walked back toward the gallery, her silver cane clicking firmly on the stone, Maya remained on the ground, clutching the priceless box that had once been junk. She had all the wealth in the world in her hands, and absolutely nothing left in her heart. Wealth is what you have, but character is who you are. Never trade the people who love you for the people who simply want to be seen with you. Because when the lights go out, only love remains to guide you home. If this lesson resonated with you, hit the like button and subscribe to our family. Comment the word loyalty below if you believe that a mother's love is worth more than any designer label or guest list. This is Moments and Meanings. Remember, every moment has a meaning, but not every truth is easy to face. See you in the next story.